Mr. Gerald Rose from One Arrow First Nation, Saskatchewan, Grey Cup champion. Here we go, guys, give a hand. Thank you. Tunsi, Wabasca, how we doing? That was weak. We're gonna try that one more time. How we doing? All right. I want to start off by first thanking the sponsors that helped put this together. I also want to thank Daryl for reaching out to me a few weeks ago to make this happen on short notice. I've known Daryl for probably over 10 years now. I met him back in Edmonton. But today, guys, I'm going to share my story with you. My journey, the obstacles that I was faced with at a young age, the things that I had to overcome. You see, as a child, it was my dream to one day play professional football. And I was able to obtain that dream through hard work and learning to surround myself with positive people. So I played 9 years of professional football in the CFL. I started off my career with the Edmonton Eskimos. I played 4 seasons with the Edmonton Eskimos. After my 4th season, I became a free agent. I actually got released by the Eskimos. So then I signed with the BC Lions in 2010. I played 5 years with the BC Lions, and on my 2nd year, I had an opportunity to go to the Grey Cup Championship with the BC Lions. So we won the championship that year. I have my championship ring here with me. And what I'll do is I'm gonna pass the ring around as I'm speaking. And as I'm passing it around, I ask that you remain quiet, because if you're going to be all distracting and everything like that, I'll take the ring away and then you'll ruin it for other people that do want to see the ring. So on this championship ring, there's 99 little diamonds on the front of the ring. It's a symbol of, it was the 99th Grey Cup championship that we won. So the rest of the ring is made up with white gold. The ring is valued at just over $20,000. So I'll pass it around. And if any of you think you're slick and you want to try and take off with it, I'm still in somewhat shape. I'll tackle you outside, I'll take you down.
Not.
Joking. No, I'm not actually. But I'll pass that around, and I just ask that you remain quiet. Take a few seconds to look at it and pass it on to the person beside you. So I want to get right into my story. After my story, I'll open it up for you guys if you guys want to ask any questions. So I want to talk a little bit about where I come from. You see, my family, we come from a reserve out in Saskatchewan. It's called One Arrow First Nation, so I'm half Cree and I'm half Nigerian. So I want to start by talking about my mom. And so my mom was part of the residential school. So as many of us know that our families were taken from our communities and placed in the boarding school, which was called the residential school. So while my mom was at the residential school, my mother was left-handed. And so every time my mom would use her left hand, my mom would get hit with the strap for being left-handed. My mother also spoke her Cree language fluently. So every time my mom would speak her language, my mom would get slapped in the mouth for speaking her language. My mother also had a medical condition. And what that medical condition was my mother was not able to control her bladder. So there are many nights that my mom would end up wetting the bed. And what the nuns would do is they'd make my mom stand up in the middle of the room, like I'm standing in front of you right now, and they'd place the sheet over her head that she had peed on to be made an example of. So now you can imagine the amount of hurt, the embarrassment that my mom was dealing with at such a young age. So when my mom was finally done with the residential school, my mom is now becoming a young adult. So my mom makes a decision to move to Edmonton, Alberta. And so while my mom is there and she's now becoming a young adult, my mother doesn't know who she could talk to or who she could trust. You see, she had gone through so many traumatic things from the residential school. My mom bottled up all her emotions. So my mother ended up turning to drugs and alcohol as a way to numb her pain. And as many of us know, that drugs and alcohol isn't the solution. It ends up tearing families apart. So I was born February 27, 1984. I came into a broken home. I came into a home where my mother was a full-blown drug addict. I grew up not knowing my father. You see, my father got deported back to Nigeria while my mother was pregnant. So all I have is just pictures of my dad. And my mom would go through these pictures and she'd say, "My boy, this is your father. The other thing that my mother had was an address to where my father lived. She said, "My boy, why don't you write a letter to your dad?" So I remember I wrote a letter to my father, 8 years old. I write a letter to my father. We ended up mailing it off. About a month and a half goes by. We get a letter back. So my mom said, "My boy, we got the letter back from your father. Sit on the couch. I'm gonna read this letter to you." So I'm sitting on the couch and my mom starts to read this letter. After the first few sentences, my mom all of a sudden stops reading the letter and I could see my mom starting to cry. I said, "Mom, what's wrong?" She said, "My boy, this letter isn't from your father. This letter is actually from your father's wife. You see, while my father was studying, going to university in Edmonton, my mother knew nothing about my father being married and having a whole other family back in Nigeria. So my father's wife wrote the letter stating, 'Do not contact us again. We want nothing to do with you or JR.' And so as my mom read this off in the letter, I remember I started to cry. I got up off the couch and I went to my room. And I was so crushed because I wanted so badly to have some sort of involvement with my father. You know, as a young boy, I always wanted to be able to call someone dad. So as time went on, I would often look to some of my mom's boyfriends to be that father figure. I remember there was a man in my mom's life, not more than maybe 2 months. I remember approaching this man, I said, "Can I call you dad?" And I remember just like it was yesterday, the man looked me right in the face. He said, "JR, you cannot call me dad. You are not my son." 10 years old, I built up so much courage to ask this man, to put myself out there, to now having to deal with this type of rejection. So now as time has continued to go on, my mother is still struggling with her addictions. My mother would often leave me at babysitters' places as she'd go on her weekend binges. My mom brought me to this one place downtown Edmonton. She said, "My boy, I'll be back to pick you up tomorrow." Tomorrow had turned into 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It had gone a whole week that I hadn't heard from my mom. After the 7th day, my mom finally came back to the apartment, picked me up, and took me home. About 6 months later, we ended up moving to the north side of Edmonton into a low-income housing unit. And so as we're now there, my mom is still battling with her addictions. But now my mom found a new place to drop me off at as she'd go and do her thing on the weekends. And at first, this new place, there was a man that was there and everything was awesome. You see, the guy that was babysitting me, he would take me outside, we'd play street hockey in the front yard, we'd then throw the football in the backyard. Everything seemed okay. But after about 6 to 8 months, things started to change. Things started to shift in my behavior. And my mom could never figure out. As my mom's going to try and drop me off, I would then grab onto my mom and I'd grab my mom and I'd beg my mom. I said, "Mom, I don't want to stay here. I don't want to be here." I remember my mom always kissing me on the forehead saying, "Everything will be okay." So after that 6 to 8 month period where things started to change, you know, there was a man that was there that I thought had my best interests at heart. I finally